Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with a turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. My dad, a 21-year Army vet, was accused of stolen valor for using his handicap placard. By the time my dad was wrapping up his 21 years in the Army, his body had taken more hits than a rusted Humvee. 2 decades of combat, arms work, deployments, ruck marches, field rotations, sleeping on rocks had shredded his knees and spine. His doctors had already diagnosed him with severe arthritis, chronic back damage, and nerve compression. He walked stiffly, every step a reminder that service isn't free. Near the end of his final enlistment, he was issued a handicap placard and put on a permanent PT profile. The only reason he wasn't medically discharged was because he was set to retire anyway. One day, he and my mom headed on to base to pick up a few things from the PX. Dad, old school as ever, was still in uniform, a proud E7 NCO with the bearing of someone who'd spent his life keeping soldiers in line. They pulled into the lot and parked in a handicap space. Placard up, no problem. Enter Dependa Karen. For the uninitiated, Dependa is military slang for the kind of spouse who treats their partner's rank as their own, entitled, loud, and usually one energy drink away from trying to fight a lieutenant. She storms up before my parents can even get out of the car. "Excuse me, you can't park there." Dad looks around, confused. "I'm sorry?" She points dramatically at the blue lines. "This is for disabled people." Dad blinks, then calmly gestures to the handicap placard. "Yes, ma'am, that's me." Wrong move. She puffs up like a turkey. "No, it's not. You're in uniform. Soldiers aren't disabled. You're just lazy, abusing the system. I'm taking your name down." Now, under normal circumstances, Dad would have told her exactly where to stick her clipboard of imaginary authority, but he was in uniform, on base, and determined to keep his cool. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "I've been in combat zones longer than you've probably been married. My medical status is not your business." That only made her angrier. She demanded his rank and unit, claiming she was married to an officer and that she'd have him court-martialed for fraud. Dad, ever the helpful NCO, pointed to his uniform. "Name and rank are right here, ma'am." Her face went red. "Don't you ma'am me. Who's your commanding officer?" "Captain Reynolds," he said with a smile. "Want his number? I've got it." That's when she completely lost it, screaming that she'd call base security right now. And she did. So there they stood, my dad and mom quietly waiting while Karen paced back and forth on her phone like she was calling in an airstrike. Within minutes, 2 security forces airmen rolled up in their patrol car. "Sir, ma'am, we got a report of unauthorized use of a handicap space," one said carefully. Dad handed over his ID, the placard, and his medical profile, laminated, because of course it was. "No problem, gentlemen. Everything's in order." Karen immediately jumped in, shrieking about stolen valor and disrespecting real soldiers. One of the airmen frowned. "Ma'am, he's literally in uniform, and his name matches the placard registration." She jabbed her finger toward Dad. "He's lying. Look at him. He can stand just fine." The other airman sighed, radioed something in, and then, just to be thorough, asked Dad to confirm his retirement date. Dad told him, calm as ever, "Next Friday. After 21 years, I'm finally done." The first airman nodded, handed Dad his ID back, and turned to Karen. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. You're causing a scene on federal property." She sputtered, "He's faking it. He should be punished." That's when my mom stepped in, all 5'4" of her, and said sweetly, "Maybe your husband should focus on teaching you how rank works instead of letting you embarrass him like this." Security couldn't help themselves. They laughed. Even Dad cracked a smile. Karen wasn't laughing. She stormed off toward her SUV, still yelling about reporting this to command. The airmen waved my parents through, both shaking their heads. One of them muttered, "Every base has one of those." A week later, Dad retired with full honors. He's since had 2 spinal surgeries and walks with a cane most days. Still sharp as ever, still proud of his service. And Karen? Nothing ever came of her report. So here's to you, Dependa Karen, proof that even after 21 years of deployments, bureaucracy, and bad chow, the most dangerous battlefield my dad ever faced was the PX parking lot. Your mom's closing line was the perfect, devastating counterattack. It shifted the focus from your dad's legitimacy to Karen's profound ignorance and the embarrassment she was undoubtedly causing for the officer she claimed to be married to. our second story. My crops are ruined. A customer's conspiracy theory about the white lumps in her garden soil. A couple of years ago, I worked in customer service at a big home improvement store. You know the one. It's very orange. I was working the customer service and returns desk alone on a slow day, doing my stuff, handling paperwork, when a couple came up to the returns desk with no product to return. They started immediately yelling at me about the white things and lumps and all of the soil they'd bought. They'd bought upwards of 100 bags to take care of a large greenhouse. They'd opened and used all 100 bags, so didn't have any to bring back to me. I had them show me the product in store. The white things and lumps were fertilizer pellets. ETA, also things used to help with water drainage. So I explained to them, oh, no worries, that's just the fertilizer pellets. Instead of buying extra fertilizer, it's put right into the soil. That's why it's more expensive than basic soil/dirt. Well, this woman starts screaming at me, no, there's no such thing. I'm telling you, the soil has been tampered with by terrorists. They want to destroy my crops. My crops are ruined. Cue back and forth for half an hour of this woman just absolutely losing it on me, demanding that we tear down her entire greenhouse, sift the soil, and rebuild and redo her entire garden. She's absolutely gone bonkers, insisting that terrorists are trying to take over our country. They're trying to kill her by poisoning her food and crops, and that we need to remove this product from the shelves or she's going to the media. Finally, my manager shows up. I had to walk away because I couldn't control the laughing. She yelled at him for another hour before she left, insisting she'd be going to the media. Never heard from her again. Probably the terrorists poisoned her food or something? That woman sounds like the final boss of conspiracy theorists. You did the right thing walking away, because honestly, no amount of customer service training prepares you for terrorist fertilizer pellets. And our next story. They paid 5 times more than my first settlement offer. 5 years ago, my little consulting firm took a new client, an e-commerce company which sells DIY tools, inflatable, above-ground pools, wood fences, etc. In the end, they sell things that can weigh a few grams or 1.5 metric ton, about 3,000 pounds. One day, I was walking through account payable office when I saw the courier monthly invoice laying on the desk. Just to give you an idea, the company fulfilled and shipped something like 200 to 250,000 orders per year, so every invoice had more than 10,000 records. May to September invoices were well above 20,000 and sometimes 30,000. Every shipment was detailed in a single line record that showed a bunch of data like date of shipping, order number, tracking number, place of delivery, actual weight, volumetric weight, base price, and surcharges. Volumetric weight is the weight calculated by a formula which multiplies volume, in cubic meters, by a constant 300 kilogram, but every courier has its own, and they use volumetric weight instead of actual weight to bill shippings. Just in the first records, I noticed something odd. A couple of orders billed something like €1,000, weighed a few kilograms, but had a volumetric weight of 2,000 kilograms. That's 4,000-ish pounds. Well, I knew the company was selling bulky goods, but those usually weighed a lot. My sixth sense told me something was wrong, so I searched the orders in the database and I was right. The orders were for some electric DIY tool, a drill and something else, and there was no chance they could have a volumetric weight of tons. I talked with management and asked if they knew anything about this discrepancy. Nope, they told me, but the average cost of shipping per order was consistent throughout last year's, so I shouldn't have had to worry. In my head, it was a big no. I talked with top executives and agreed to be invited to the upcoming quarter meeting with the courier. A couple of weeks later, I attended the meeting but stayed almost silent for a couple of hours. When they were almost done, I just passed a little dossier to everyone. The first sheets were a copy of a few pages of their last invoice where I'd highlighted some records, and behind there was the copy of corresponding orders with goods descriptions. Obviously, weights didn't match. I pointed that those were just a few examples of the billing errors I found. I acknowledged that errors were in favor of both parties. Sometimes they billed less than they should have, but the sample I analyzed 1 month, about 15,000 shippings, gave me a 5% average overbilling. To cut it short, I asked them a 5% discount on previous year invoices, in total 100 to 125k euros, and a review of contract terms taking out volumetric weight, surcharges, etc. Obviously, they asked for my files, which I immediately sent, and we agreed to discuss it in a week. The week passed, and I got an email from the area manager. Basically, they rejected my offer because they did their math, taking into account the last 3 years, and I was wrong. On the contrary, their company underbilled thousands of shipments, but since my client was very valuable to them, they wouldn't ask anything. Last but not least, they were willing to send me the shipping data from the last 3 years, more than 600,000 single records, each one made of more than 40 single information, if I really wanted to do a complete analysis. Needless to say, this didn't make a good impression with company executives and owners because I'd already told them I was damn sure they were owed money. It took me a month to clean 36 CSV files full of data I didn't need, involve IT to extract from the company database what I needed, basically the weight of the articles of every single order and their destination, and build a model that, taking into account contract terms, could estimate the precise cost of shipping for each and every order. I can't explain how difficult it was. Mind that the shipping costs mainly depended on weight, region, state, and province, county, but there were 3 different surcharges and a crap ton of exceptions. Small towns in the Alps, islands, orders with multiple shippings, full or partial returns, etc. It was excruciating and painful going through all that, double-check every result that showed an odd peak, etc. On top of this, I had to buy a more powerful laptop because mine took too much time to apply tens of thousands of formulas. All in all, it took me more than 2 months to get a correct evaluation, just in time for the next quarter meeting, but this time just the CEO knew what I'd found because I had to get him involved as well as a lawyer. I was the first to speak, and it went more or less in this way. Hey, do you remember that when you turned down my settlement offer because we did our math, you also said I could go through 3 years of shippings if I really would? Well, it took me 2 months, but I actually did, and guess what? You were damn right. In fact, your company did not overbill my client by 5% on average. I said this with a calm, low voice, trying to take some sort of defeat in my eyes. But by 10%, period. I've just sent you an email with a link to download half a gigabyte of files, and as I know you'll want to do a sample check, the IT team created an account so you can access the database and check every single order, its articles, weight, etc. Obviously, the previous offer is no longer on the table. Now we demand a full refund of 600-ish thousand euros plus the full cost of my work within 10 days, and since we're confident you were in good faith, a complete review of the contract. Otherwise, the person next to me, who happens to be a lawyer, will file a civil lawsuit demanding damages, interest, and legal expenses, along with a fraud report to prosecutor. As far as we're concerned, this is the end of today's meeting, but I'm sure you'll get back once you've actually done your math. A week later, they got back and offered $550K plus a full refund of my cost, and in 1 month, my client had a brand new and much simpler contract without volumetric weight and surcharges, tens of exceptions, etc. And our last story. He fired me for a ridiculous reason. When our companies partnered, I became his supervisor for 2 weeks. This story takes place back in the late 90s during my first real job, a grimy basement call center for a company I'll call XYZ. It was legitimate, but just barely. The fluorescent lights buzzed, the air was stale, and the chairs creaked like they were older than I was. My boss, Ernie, was a newly promoted supervisor who had clearly let the tiny bit of power go straight to his head. I was 19 or 20 at the time, one of the youngest on the team, which apparently made me his favorite target. He'd constantly threatened to write me up for ridiculous things like being too casual on the phones or not smiling through my voice. The irony? My customer satisfaction scores were among the best in the department. His favorite move was trying to intimidate people, but I never gave him the satisfaction. I'd just nod and say, okay, and go about my work, which made him even angrier. He couldn't handle not being feared. Then one day, out of nowhere, he pulled me aside before my shift started. "You're fired," he said flatly. "For what reason?" I asked. He smirked and said, "Because you sound like a 12-year-old on the phone." That was it. Not poor performance, not attendance, just that. I stood there for a second, then shrugged. "Cool," I said. "Good luck." And honestly, I was relieved to be done with that miserable place. A few weeks later, I landed at another call center, this one the complete opposite of XYZ, bright, clean, well-run, with management that actually treated people like humans. They invested in training, offered advancement opportunities, and encouraged people to grow. I thrived there. Within months, I was promoted and had earned the trust of upper management. Then one day, my manager approached me with a proposal. He was joined by another manager, Paul, who oversaw our partner relationships. Paul explained that one of our new vendors was launching a major project on our behalf, and he needed someone to supervise things for 2 weeks while he was on vacation. My job would be to monitor their performance, ensure compliance, and provide daily reports. Then Paul said the vendor's name, XYZ. I nearly laughed, and then he mentioned the site contact, Ernie. I told Paul and my manager the whole story, how Ernie had fired me for sounding 12 and how awful the work environment had been. Paul grinned. Can you remain professional, he asked. Oh, absolutely, I said. Good, he replied, his grin widening. Then you're perfect for the job. We arrived at XYZ together on Monday morning. As we entered the building, Paul said, walk behind me. I could see the amusement in his eyes. He marched right up to Ernie, shook his hand, and said, Ernie, I'm excited about this project, but I'll be away for 2 weeks, so this is my stand-in. She's my eyes and ears while I'm gone, and what she says goes. She'll be sending me daily reports. Got it? Ernie turned pale when he saw me step forward. Hello, Ernie, I said, keeping my voice calm and professional. Paul clapped his hands. Great, looks like you two already know each other. The shock on Ernie's face was priceless. For the first week, I was nothing but polite. I praised his staff openly and often, especially when Ernie was around. Great job handling that call, Mark. Don't you agree, Ernie? He'd force a strained smile and agree, though I could tell it killed him to compliment his team. I also knew he hated it when employees took breaks, so every day I'd remind him, loudly enough for the staff to hear, hey, it's break time. Do you agree they should take it? He couldn't say no without making our company look bad, so everyone got their full breaks. The employees loved me. Ernie, not so much. By the second week, I tightened the screws. I started asking him to walk me through his daily reports in detail. He clearly hated it. I'd nod, ask follow-ups, and occasionally just look at him silently before shaking my head and asking him to move on. He began second-guessing everything, getting flustered, even asking me for clarification. By midweek, he was visibly nervous whenever I entered the room. So on my final day, he tried to act casual and asked, so how do you think the launch went? What have you been reporting to Paul? I smiled sweetly and said, oh, I don't know, Ernie. What would I know? I only sound like a 12-year-old on the phone. Then I walked out, leaving him standing there speechless. A year later, I heard through the grapevine that XYZ had shut down and Ernie was unemployed. Meanwhile, I'd been promoted again and was now managing my own department. It felt good, not just the petty revenge, but the beautiful full circle of it all. The biggest lesson I learned, always treat people decently. You never know when that kid who sounds 12 will end up being the one you have to report to. This is why you never burn bridges, because sometimes the bridge comes back wearing a suit and holding your performance report. He thought sounding 12 made you weak. Turns out it made you his boss. The universe didn't even have to intervene, just good timing, professionalism, and a long memory. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.